to another episode of Comprehensive Yoga Therapist. Where am I now? Today we have a first-year graduate, the very beginnings of the program. Erika Tenenbaum is with us. She is from outside of Philadelphia in the Westchester area, and she is an esthetician, all natural style esthetician, and a full-time yoga instructor, yoga therapist, and yoga therapy trainer. And we've had the privilege of knowing each other for roughly 20 years, somewhere thereabouts. So Erika, welcome today.
Thank you. And I want to clarify, farm fresh facial, all food.
Oh,
all and only food on the face.
That's right.
That's what I call it, the farm fresh facials.
Everybody who talks about it would say that, you know, you could eat the same things that your products, you could literally ingest them and you'd be fine.
Yes.
That's cool.
Healthy, more than just fine. Good for you.
Yeah, that's right. Your skin is an ecosystem, isn't it, Erika? I've heard this many times. Yeah. So in our talk today, everybody, we wanted to kind of cover maybe 4 areas, starting with like insights Erika's had about in her life from yoga therapy itself, and then talk about yoga teaching, and then talk about clients, and then talk about training. Mm-hmm. So starting off with just maybe your top couple of ways yoga therapy has affected just your life, your daily life.
A lot. Listening has been the biggest one. The listening and the holding space for myself, that would have to be added to it. To be okay with sitting and settling and listening, and even when things get maybe a little bit uproarious emotionally around me, I can stay steady and grounded and learn how to keep my space, and it's okay to keep the space for others.
All right, we're going to have to unpack this.
Okay.
All right, think of parents, school teachers, hairstylists, anybody in the service industry, nurses, doctors, just keep going down the list. Yeah. Anybody who interacts with a lot of other humans, which is most people, are met with strong emotions at different times. My car mechanic has plenty of stories. Nobody has ever trained in how to deal with that. So how do you actually achieve what you just explained? Like, what are the steps to do that? That's a big thing, actually.
I'm still working on it all the time. So it's a practice. It's an ongoing practice in reminding myself of all the different ways, or I should say, all the different ways that each system needs its help. So I know that my body needs a certain thing every day. I know that my mind and my energy needs a certain thing every day. I know that my emotions, if they're a little shaky under my feet, okay, I'm going to need to do this now. Learning what actually makes me most balanced first has helped me then work on it when it's not so imbalanced. So maybe that's a better way to look at it. I had to pay attention to where I'm steady.
It's we might call that your now, I know when people say personal practice in yoga, they see a yoga routine. I know you probably do a yoga routine for yourself. But it sounds more like your personal practice goes on all these multi-levels so that you're very centered, I guess I'd say.
It needs to happen for that, yes.
That's one key ingredient.
Yes.
So that if, in other words, just to explain this for everybody, if I was like this a little bit, all over the place with myself, then as soon as an emotion came, it would strike me and I would even get worse. Okay, so you're holding the space for yourself. Interesting. And then when somebody does come at you or share their feelings, even if it has nothing to do with you, how then do you hold yourself in that situation?
I work on grounding all the time, and the grounding, and not just feeling my feet on the earth, which is of course the first thing I do, but it's the perspective study that has been coming into play a lot, and not making it about me. So the perspective study, meaning I tend to make it about myself, or people tend to do that at first. You hear a story and then you're like, oh, I can relate to that because this, that, or the other happened to me in kind. But then I'm no longer there and available when that happens. And I had to remember that this is their time. This is their story. My story is something different, and it has nothing to do with my story right now. And I ground myself and I listen.
So it's very, I use this term culturally accepted or kind of normal to say, oh, I felt that way too, as a way of attempting to create a rapport or a warmth with the person who's going through a difficult time. And you're saying that you don't do that.
Well, I used to do that. And I realized I used to do it all the time. Actually, it was just a natural thing. You think you do connect with people, until I realized through training, and also then the training opens your lens to pay attention to, well, let's see what happens when I actually do that. When I go to that automatic response to want to relate, make it about myself, and it's not really being met because they're not needing that right now. And that's not what the person is looking for in that moment. And then it just gets lost. And then I feel bad. And then that creates a whole other level of things that I go around with, working on my guilt and all that good stuff that comes from way back.
So ostensibly, this normal thing of you saying, my car broke down today, something very innocuous, and I say, oh gosh, 2 months ago, my car broke down. And I say that, I immediately cut the speaker off. And although this may not sound like a yoga thing, it's not like a yoga pose. Oh, it's just not right. But it's yoga of the mind and the heart, which then affects your energy tremendously.
Yes.
Because like you can walk around all day after an incident where it wasn't as simple as a car breaking down, it was more charged. Maybe they did come after you a tiny bit and it could ruin your whole day or even your week. Yeah, so that's really
honestly,
powerful.
my perspective may be at the time I might be going, oh, mine was terrible, but what if theirs wasn't? And I'm now adding unnecessary perspective stress to a situation that didn't need to happen anyway.
Exactly. So you could just listen to them, and then be a nice presence for them.
It's very compassionate. Most people aren't listened to. So I've learned that too in that process is mostly they want to be heard. When I work with my clients in the aesthetic room and just listening to family members when there's a grieving process going on, they just want to be listened. They want to be validated. They don't want to be stopped or fixed or none of that.
Very good. I better be on good behavior in this conversation.
That's okay. So I'll be very grounded in the process.
I better not cut you off by identifying with your feelings as mine.
Well, we are all human and connected, so.
No, I know. So that's really helpful. We can jump into the next subject unless you have another. I mean, that's huge. That handles like your interactions with your family, friends, esthetician people, and obviously your yoga therapy work. Any other big things? I mean, that you kind of covered a lot, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to separate it. You can't compartmentalize it. Once that yoga therapy training cap is on my head, it doesn't leave my head. It's always on, and I'm just, the lens is,
yeah.
Oh, observational, making this, the noise and the pacing slow enough to be observational so I can like pay attention and just simply.
And I guess the way that I'm taking from this, you're really succinct in saying this. You went through the levels of a human being, whereas you went with the physical level, the energy, the emotion, the intellect, and the spirit. And you're basically just paying attention to all parts of yourself. And that's huge. So in terms of, say, yoga teaching, because you obviously taught a lot of yoga and you still do, any special highlights?
No, that it just keeps me teaching. I'm so glad for it. I'm so happy to keep having the weekly classes to apply this information. This is how I've been doing it over the years too, even from the beginnings of training, taking that information, and then it grounds me to teach the weekly classes and to teach regularly and to be an educator for the higher level courses has been, all it does is keep me a student, which is my favorite part. My mom used to always tease me, you're an eternal student. Yes, I absolutely am.
Okay, I've heard this plenty of times where teachers say they're the student, but when we're the student, we feel like the teachers like kind of
Yeah.
grade us and stuff. So it's kind of a paradoxical phrase. So why don't you tell us what it really means?
There's just so much to learn, and it's wonderful to be able to learn it. Simply saying it. There's just, and you
How do
can't
you
learn
learn it?
everything. So it's just great to just keep tightening the thread of information and seeing the connection weaving together more and more. The more I learn, the more I realize, not just, oh, the more I learn, the more I know I don't know. It's actually the more I learn, the more I realize I've learned. Like, oh, there comes, now I see the connection between that. I see the connection of weaving the body, the mind, the energy, how to do that. I see the connection of the yoga practice being beyond just the physical work, even though it's physical, but the seeing the connection to the spiritual side of it while working the body, or seeing the body's response while working the spiritual and mental side of things. So the thread of that universal connection just gets tighter and tighter. And that's the big
Right.
learning.
That's a really nice way to put it. So therefore, in your motivation in doing that is you're constantly being fulfilled yourself.
Yeah. And
So
validated in many ways.
validated.
Yeah, I know that sounds weird. It's a way of going, I knew that. Oh, that makes sense now. You get that
Ah,
reassurance that you see your education come out in
I
real
see.
life, in real time when you see that happen.
Nice.
Mhm.
So, how about if you share a little bit about working with yoga therapy clients? I might set you up a little bit here and just expand the question. I ask everybody in these things, these interviews, this question. But I think what I might do in setting you up in a way is, again, although you don't do yoga poses with an esthetician client, it is still a one-on-one situation. So I know like that's not a yoga therapy session per se, but it kind of has the spiritual and the counseling side in there.
Well, I mean, we're going back to nomadic stuff when we were talking about what I do with people as far as grooming, touching, being close to them. It's said that the reason why we're still here is because of the grooming process and helping each other and touching each other, and that development came from that. And when you're in that environment and you're hands-on, literally hands-on with someone and on their face, this personal space that you're in, yeah, there's a deep connection. And yoga therapy sessions, so many of them, yoga poses don't even come into play. Everything else comes into play. When I work with a client in the treatment space, I start with a breath. So right there, yoga's in. Then we don't start anything without taking a full experienced breath first, and then we go into the process and what do we need today? What's the conversation, the consultation, and then the treatment. So
And
it's always there.
that's a yoga therapy time.
That's when it begins. And it just, even when I'm doing a facial, as soon as I get them to settle into their space and breathing, how are we doing today? That's it.
Okay,
Yoga.
let me understand. So when you do an esthetician treatment with a client, you start with deep breathing.
Yes, I do. Everyone.
So it almost looks the way that we would start a yoga therapy session.
Exactly right.
Wow.
And a yoga
Do
class.
do people see? A lot of times, I've found this when people have whatever career profession they're still in. Yoga therapist isn't always full time as a job, but it starts to always become that. I have like a professor who says, I do yoga therapy every day, but she doesn't teach yoga poses. And that's one of our jokes. And she's constantly using breathing with her students, mindfulness, self-understanding, confidence skills so that they develop and they do better in their class. Or a whole variety of people, a lot of business people don't become stressed in what would be considered a stressful environment. So that's kind of what you're saying in a sense, is that you're actually using it while being in this as an esthetician.
I do it too. So even before I walk into the room, my shoes come off. I ground myself. I take my breath. Well, that's the best part of
Wow.
one of the reason why I kept coming back to my yoga practice is because I didn't need to wear shoes. It was the best part. So the shoes come off and I stand and I create an intention before I walk into the space. I take my breath and then I go into work with my
Wow.
client. And there you go.
Nice.
Yeah.
What are yoga therapy clients like?
They are ready for it because they're looking for it. The aesthetic clients are usually, well, when they're used to it, they're used to it. But the new ones are like, thank you. I really needed that breath. The yoga therapy clients, they're, wow, I couldn't wait to get to my breathing. Or I couldn't wait to see you or talk with you today because the perspective study, that's the little title I'm giving the clients nowadays, is not that you're doing your work, that we're doing a perspective study, that we're taking the idea of the situation and your reactions and how do we observe whether they work for you or not. So we start each one with that. Okay, let's take a deep breath, check in, what perspective did you bring in with you, and or their intention, and then we go from there.
How does that relate to somebody's health?
Oh, wow. Well, hasn't stress, well, we could go back to the aesthetic stuff too. When my clients would say, oh, stress causes me to break out. I said, well, and this is my answer to them, and this could be an answer for you. Well, have you ever known anyone whose heart has been affected by stress, who's had heart disease or had any kind of problems in their lives that stress has exacerbated? They're like, oh my God, yes, of course, almost all of them. Well, why can't it
Stomach,
break you out?
back pain, neck pain, facial sinus trouble, jaw tight tension. You could just go over the whole body, right?
Whole thing.
Digestive system.
Yeah. And so if we see stress showing up, which we see it all the time, always and everywhere, how do we navigate that? What tools do we have available from our yoga practices, our breathing practices, our all the other practices that fall underneath that space, and how can we use it in a practical manner? The pragmatist at heart that I am.
But so what I hear you saying is that there's two components. There's the way I look at life, which is causing me to choose stress or to choose peace or harmony, right? And then there's the yoga practices that allow that grounding and regulation that strengthen us within ourselves, to stay within ourselves. Yeah.
And to
Very cool.
balance, to find out what serves us appropriately. Back to that original concept is, where am I most balanced? How do I look when I'm balanced? What does that feel like? And
Yeah.
so knowing that, and then when we're not in that balance, which it comes, the ebb and flow of life, as it were, and we are off kiltered, then we know, okay, well, something's off. I'm not doing my normal stuff, or
Right.
that my pattern or my ritual or my whatever it is that you do.
Right. Very nice. Very nice. I'm sure we can come up with some angle. So then you've been doing a lot of training with the yoga therapists and yoga teachers. And how has that been for you?
I mean, fairly glorious, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about everything that we've talked about and sum it up in those moments. And when you realize, when I'm validated, I realize my education, I see the efforts, I've always claimed to be a karma yogi, the work, always putting in the work. And I see it, the concept of it being burned off. When you don't have to worry about that end result, you keep putting in that effort, it's going to be, and the purpose behind the effort, to have to force myself to think about all the different angles. When you speak to really highly intelligent people, like I get a chance to, and I start to put together programs for our weekends, I have to think like almost all those minds are going to possibly think, okay, this question's probably going to come up and this is going to probably come up. So the eternal student is there. I'm always studying, and it's always making me have to delve deeper into the information. I love that part of it, the research.
So in preparing, this is another good way of saying how the teacher is a perpetual student. You have to think like a student would think, anticipate the variety of personalities and what they might share or question or need to learn, and how to teach them. So that's kind of how, if the teacher is here and the student is here, the teacher has to migrate here, especially during their preparation, not just to mention while teaching, and then gain this perspective in order to share in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we're always setting up learning activities. So what's the best way somebody's going to learn?
Oh,
That's
and that's a
awesome.
constant brainstorming.
You covered a lot of ground very succinctly.
It's hard not to when you're wearing that cap all the time and you're always working the threads, tightening up.
You're just in it. Yeah. Do you want to
Yeah.
share any final thoughts before we wrap up our Where Am I Now interview? We could do another one in the future.
Yeah, I'm certainly up for another one in the future. Just the typical stuff, just keep studying, keep being curious. That's the best thing I could possibly say, is stay curious.
Beautiful. Well, thanks
Yeah.
for sharing all your wisdom, Erika, and your experiences.
You,
It
Bob.
gives us a good perspective. And may the journey continue.
Yes. Thank you,
All right.
Bob.
God bless.